Before we dive into today's episode, a quick reminder to get your tickets to the Heart-Centered Business Conference. It's coming up in Noosa, Queensland in September and is one of the most inviting, inclusive and transformational rooms you can be in. Come and be in the room where it happens. The Heart-Centered Business Conference, it's going to be spectacular. You can find out more at tashcorbin.com/conference. I hope to see you there. When someone comments on your posts on socials or replies to an email of yours, do you have a way of ensuring that you're engaging with those people to build a relationship and find the hot leads in your audience? If not, that is what I'm going to cover in today's episode of the Heart-Centered Business Podcast, because a conversation that came up at virtual conference earlier this year highlighted to me just how much people were struggling with engaging with their audience and how to respond to people commenting, replying, and engaging. And I ended up at virtual conference coming up with a little framework on the fly to help people. And in the months since, I have had people come back to me and say that because of that structure, they are turning commenters into leads. And that is exactly the whole idea of what we're doing. So this is episode number 534 of the Heart-Centered Business Podcast. And that means you can find all the show notes and the relevant links from today's episode over at tashcorbin.com/534. And in this episode, I'm going to walk you through how to nurture relationships with your engaged audience to generate leads. And there's a big difference between someone who engages with your content on social media and someone who is actively considering working with you. I'm going to help you to not only discern who's who, but actually convert one into the other. That's our job as business owners, as the lead marketing officer for our own businesses. So that's what we're going to do. Let's jump in because this is a really practical episode. Hello, I'm Tash Corbin, a business strategist and mentor based on the Sunshine Coast in Australia. The mission of this podcast is to help heart-centered entrepreneurs to make more money and in doing so, change the world for the better. This podcast was recorded on the lands of the Gubbi Gubbi and Jinnaburra people. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Firstly, you may have heard the advice that when you get comments on social media, you should be replying to every comment. And I think that's fairly consistent advice that everyone has heard. The thing I didn't realise until this conversation at virtual conference this year was that for a lot of people, they thought if someone comments on a post and says, oh, this was really helpful, that they just had to comment back with something. So they have been commenting back with emojis or a little, thanks so much, I'm glad it helped, or a little something, but they are closing down conversation with their reply instead of drawing people into conversation with their reply. And I didn't realize how bad it was until someone asked about it at virtual conference and a bunch of people had the same issue, the same challenge. Now, the way that I've heard people describe this is they feel really awkward, they don't know how to comment back, or when they do comment back, it feels like they're getting very salesy very quickly. And so what I ended up doing on the fly at virtual conference was coming up with a little acronym, VIA, to help people know exactly how to engage back with their engaging audience in a way that's allowing them to move the conversation forwards and in the process identify and generate hot leads. So if you have people reply to your emails and you're just replying thank you, you definitely want to listen to this. If you have people comment on your socials and you're just commenting back with one-word statements or thank yous, but you're not actually turning that into a conversation, you're going to find this very helpful. Or if you are someone who finds it really hard to know what to say back, I think you'll find this really helpful as well. To understand why we need a little bit of structure here, I'm going to use the analogy that you may have seen in movies, or I think it's in that Wolf of Wall Street, you know, the story about that very terrible man selling very terrible stocks and doing a very terrible job of inflating blah, 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 right? I don't know why we're glorifying him, but anyway. So there's that whole interview. It's often done in job interview question of, when you're finding someone in a sales role, you should say to them, okay, sell me this pen, right? And you like, here's this pen and you have to sell me this pen. And it was very popular in the 80s and 90s. Even now, people who don't understand why it's a terrible task to give someone will still use this in job applications and interviews, where they'll say, sell me this piece of paper. Sell me these Post-it notes. Can you tell I'm looking at things on my desk? And I love lamp. Anyway, so it's often done, right? Like it's like this whole, like if to be a good salesperson, you should be able to sell me anything. So here, sell me this pen. And really, in essence, if I was to be asked that question, hey, sell me this pen, I would be like, well, do you need a pen? And the first thing I want to do is ask questions, right? That's the whole point of being a good salesperson, is actually not to be like, this is a great pen. You should love this pen. This pen is great. Look, it writes upside down, da-da-da. Don't start pitching a pen to someone who doesn't need a pen. And in the 80s and 90s, that would have been seen as terrible salespersonship, right? To go, well, do you even need a pen? But actually, that's best practice sales. And you may have heard of this concept before of qualifying questions. That's exactly what that question is. It's a qualifying question. Do you need a pen? What do you need a pen for? What else have you used to write with? What do you like about the pen you've got? What don't you like about the pen that you've got, right? Now, I wouldn't ever do that to try and sell someone a pen, right? I would just be like, if you want it, buy it. If you don't want it, don't buy it. I don't care, right? No one's attached to the pen sales except for the stationery people. But what it does is demonstrate a very important part of the sales process, and that is qualifying questions. That is deeply understanding the needs of the buyer so that you can meet those needs with your offer. And I don't care whether your offer is a completely bespoke one-on-one package or a 6-module self-study course. If someone is engaging with your content, is in your audience, is warm and activated, is excited by a podcast you've done or a post that you've done on social media, it's not their job to then go hunting around the internet and to find your website, to find the links, to find all the things, to find a way to pay you. Not their job. Your job is to nurture and invite. It's the step 2 and step 3 of the client attraction process. Link in show notes to a previous episode that I've gone through that in detail, is how we increase the conversion rate of audience to lead and lead to paying customer. The higher ticket the offer, the more qualifying is likely to be needed, or the stronger relationship you need to build, the more understanding of the buyer's needs you're going to need to have in order to be able to present a compelling pitch and a compelling offer. Even if all you're doing is sending them to a sales page, you are far more likely for them to buy what's on that sales page if you contextualize what that offer is to their specific needs, to what it is that they are looking for, or what their goals are, or a particular challenge or struggle that they're really unsure how to solve. And so this context, this understanding of context, this asking questions, the whole goal is to build a two-way conversation, develop that connection, and qualify whether what you want to offer is a good fit, but also actually contextualize whatever offer you do direct them towards to explain why it's fit for purpose for them, for that particular buyer. Now, you might say, but Tash, I just want to share things on social media and people just go and find it themselves. People just go and click on the thing and buy. I don't want to be involved in the sales process. And that is a totally legitimate decision that you are allowed to make as a business owner. But I want you to make an informed choice here, because for myself, when I sell in with broadcast methodologies, let's say I'm launching something, I run a webinar, I have an email sequence, I have social content, right? Even with a completely broadcast launch, my broadcast launch approach for let's say a webinar converts at between 3 and 7%. And the reason why it converts so well is because in the process of promoting, delivering, and following up that webinar, I engage in qualifying. I engage in relationship building with my leads. For someone who doesn't do those things, their conversion rate can be anywhere from 0.2% to around 1 to 1.5%. So in order to make exactly the same number of sales, if I didn't do the engaging, the relationship building, and the qualifying, I would need to have at least 5 times as many leads sign up to come to my webinar to make the exact same number of sales. So as far as I'm concerned, I would rather maximize my conversion from the audience and leads that I am building rather than minimize the number of conversions I'm getting from that audience, but invest time and energy to grow that audience significantly. Because audience growth, reach, is the most expensive and time-intensive part of the client attraction process. It takes the most money and or the most time. So for me, it is smarter to invest a little bit of time and energy into relationship building, qualifying, nurturing, and that saves me needing to have an extra 10,000 people on my mailing list to make the exact same number of sales. Because it's taken me years to get the current number of people on my mailing list. I'm not willing to wait more years. I'm not willing to reduce my conversion rate by 80% for the sake of not having to engage with my audience. And the other thing for me is that conversations with other humans is one of the things that brings me the most joy in my business. And therefore, I make the choice of high connection, high conversion. So it is absolutely fine for you to make the decision that you want low connection, low conversion models. But even if you're using a low connection, low conversion model, adding in a little bit of extra into the way that you engage back with your audience can make a significant difference to the extent to which they convert quickly. It can make a significant difference to your conversion rates. So it might just be, if you're going to be commenting back on every comment on Instagram already, if you just put a little bit more extra effort in and use this little framework, that's actually going to do a far better job of having those people become hot leads and actually buy something from you. I think it's worth the energy to do that. So it's totally up to you, but that's kind of my business case for why I recommend being more thoughtful and mindful about the way that you engage. And for me, it kind of feels obvious, but I understand that it's not obvious for everyone else. But it also just makes sense to me that if people are going to the effort of commenting on my socials, why would I just neglect and ignore those people, right? I definitely wouldn't do that. But also, if I'm therefore going to comment back, why would I not take the time to comment back well and to actually engage with them? Hopefully that all makes sense. If you've got any further butt tashes on that, please do get in touch. Let me know. I'd love to hear them, because I think for most people, they are trying to reduce down their marketing and sales efforts so much. They're trying to streamline it. They're trying to automate it. They're trying to outsource it so much and disconnect themselves from the sales process so much. In doing so, they're actually making their business so much harder than it needs to be. And then they have to spend so much more time and money on other parts of their business that they also don't enjoy, all in the names of efficiency. But actually, if you can make $100 in sales in 2 hours, or you can make $10,000 in sales in 3 hours. I think the 3 hours is the most efficient, not the 2 hours. But I think sometimes people get so fixated on scraping back the time that they spend on socials or scraping back the time that they spend in marketing activities and in customer service activities that they're actually missing the very thing that would skyrocket the amount of sales that they're making. So hopefully actually engaging with your audience, especially your high engagement audience, is already something that you want to do. But if not, hopefully I've presented a really good business case there. So when you get, let's say, a comment on social media, or if you get a reply to an email or someone sends you an email out of the blue or they DM you on socials out of the blue, the VIA framework is a really helpful way to ensure that you are engaging with those people in a way that is deepening the connection and the conversation rather than just feeling awkward about saying, oh, thanks so much. So VIA stands for validate, inform, and ask. So there are 3 things that I do when I get a comment, when I get someone send me an email, right? Now, literally, I just came up with this at virtual conference in February in response to a question, but it is me taking what I naturally do and putting some structure around it to explain what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So validate, inform, and ask. So let's say you share a really good tip on socials and someone says, this was so helpful. Now, I often share something like that in the comments and I will say, oh my gosh, that was so helpful, thank you. And someone will comment back and the most consistent comment I get back is, what did you find helpful? Or what part are you going to implement, right? It's like now you've got homework. And so it's almost like I'm being punished for commenting by being given follow-up questions. Well, now you've got to do the pop quiz. What was it that you found so helpful? And that is training me to never comment on your content again because answering your question helps you, it doesn't help me. So your question is focused on you. It doesn't actually help me at all. Yeah? So instead, I recommend validate, inform, ask. So someone says, oh, this is so helpful. Let's say your advice was like how to write the letter A really neatly. And someone says, oh my gosh, that was so helpful. Thank you so much. So you validate. Yes. Oh, I'm so glad you found that helpful. The letter A is so common, isn't it? We need to learn how to do it well. Now, I'm totally making this up, but I want to give you a really weird example so we can see how clearly this framework works. So yes, that's very reasonable, or it's very helpful because we use it so commonly. It's such a good one, right? So you're validating their comment. Yes, it is, right? Yes, it is helpful. But I'm not just saying, yes, it's helpful. I am giving a little bit of validation to that helpfulness, right? Yes, it is helpful because we use the letter A all the time. Now, inform. Inform, step 2, is to make some kind of statement or a power statement where you're giving your experience and your expertise space to shine, right? This is the part where you get to send to yourself, main character energy, right? So it might be that you say something about your work with your clients or what you've observed in the market or something that lets them know that this is something you've helped with a lot, right? So it might be validate. Yes, and the letter A, we use it all the time, right? In fact, the letter A is something that most of my clients struggle with when we first start working together. All right, so now you've not just validated that it's helpful, you've informed them about something that centers your expertise. So another way that you could do that is to give a little bit more detail, right? So it might be, yes, and we use the letter A a lot. Most people struggle with the little tail at the end, right? So I'm talking about a detail of the thing that we do, right? And in most cases, people, if you start it well at the top, it's going to be much easier to finish it off strong at the end. See, I'm trying to really get into the minutiae of the letter A here. And then the final step is to ask. And what we're doing is we're asking a qualifying question related to what you've just spoken about. So in this instance, you might say, are there any other letters that you really struggle with? So see how that reply compares to, thanks, I'm glad you found it helpful. Or what did you find the most helpful about it? Or how are you going to implement this differently? What are the top 3 things you're going to do from here? And I totally understand the desire to jump straight into the question, but I really do believe that if you use this VIA framework, you are going to get far more replies to your replies, and you're doing a much better job of actually qualifying who in your engaged audience is actually interested in or would benefit from buying from you. Because sometimes people follow you because they find your content interesting, but they're 3 qualifying questions away from being excited to work with you. That's your job. That's not their job. You don't want to leave people dangling. You don't want to have people have to figure it out for themselves. Your job is to ask those qualifying questions, to assess how likely someone is to benefit from working with you, from buying your thing, from joining your program, from whatever it is that you've got to offer. That is your job. Now, of course, there will be variables in the types of comments that you get. Not everyone is going to say, thanks, that was really helpful, because not every post of yours on social media is going to be giving advice. Some of your content might be asking questions. Some of your content might be posting an offer. And even then, I see people not commenting back to comments. They've posted an offer. Someone says, wow, that looks really great. And they write back, thanks. Let me know if you want it. Okay, right? Or they don't even comment back at all. Oh, I really have been meaning to check that out. Crickets, nothing, no replies. And the thing that frustrates me the most about that is that they are the very same people who are asking me over and over again to create content templates and to help them with beating the algorithm and getting more comments on things and da-da-da. And I'm like, excuse me, you've got a dozen unanswered and unreplied comments and DMs already. Go and deal with those first, because the fastest way to dry up new leads is to completely neglect the leads you already have. And we really need to make sure we're taking care of that, right? They're the same people who sign up to buy 16 different templates of swipe files for email marketing funnels, but they're not replying to the comments that they're getting on socials. They're the same people who are fixated on saving time in the delivery of their packages because they want to be making passive income, but they would actually be making tens of thousands of dollars more if they literally just saw the leads that they had for the work that they already offer. People jumping from product idea to product idea. They've got leads for every single product idea they've ever had in their business, but they've never actually qualified those leads and made sales to those people. We've got to deal with that first. That is priority number 1. So what I wanted to do was go through a few examples using validate, inform, ask based on different business types with different niches and also different replies to certain comments. Now, I'm not going to be able to do all of them though, but hopefully this will give you a little spectrum of different types of ways that you can apply VIA in the way that you engage with people who are commenting on socials, DMing you and emailing you. If you're still stuck, you've got a tricky one, in the show notes of today's episode at tashcorbin.com/534, I will include the link to my question page and you can come and ask me there. I'll reply to you directly, but also it might inform future podcast episodes. So come and ask me questions there. And what I'll also include is a link to Skyrocket Sales, which is my program that goes through the entire process of sales, including consent-based marketing, qualifying questions, sales strategies, techniques. It's a self-study program. and we've got a special voucher, a coupon code. So I'll also pop that one for Skyrocket Sales over at tashcorbin.com/534, because if qualifying questions is new to you, if this sales approach of relationship building or two-way sales conversations is new to you, or if you really struggle with generating leads and making sales in your business, Skyrocket Sales is such a good, short, sharp program. It's 6 modules plus a bonus that really gets you to the point of upskilling in sales in a consent-based relationship building, high connection, high conversion way. And it makes such a difference when you're really struggling with the language around these things, or you're really struggling with feeling salesy, or not really knowing what you need to do to make sales. If you haven't got that clear, if your sales strategy is not clear, if your client attraction process is not clear, Skyrocket Sales is a great program to walk you through this in detail. Okay, so I'll put all of that in the show notes of today's episode. So let's do a little bit of a randomizer. I'm going to go parenting, and you've asked a question. So parenting business, the question is, what's the number one time where you really struggle to keep your cool when you're parenting? And someone says, when I've asked 6 times and they're still not doing what I ask. So how would we validate, inform, and ask? Because people do this on socials as well, where they say, I'm creating a bunch of podcasts. What are your questions? And or what are you struggling with? And someone says this, and they're like, thanks so much. I'll add it to the content bank. That person is a lead, and you're forcing them to wait till your next podcast comes out, or the podcast comes out 9 weeks' time. Now, I'm not saying don't do the podcast, but I'm also saying address the individual, validate, inform, ask on that as well. So you've said, I'm making podcasts about parenting stuff. When is it that you really struggle to keep your cool? This person has replied and said, when I've asked 6 times and they still haven't done it. So validate. Oh, yes, that's such a big one. And it's so frustrating, especially when you're trying to do it in such a loving, gentle way. And we don't ask that much of kids these days, right? Something like, I don't know, depends on your brand. Inform. One of the biggest differences that I see in my clients is they never get to having to ask 6 times, because they've really figured out how to create independence in their child's decision-making skills. So it's one of those areas where you can ask once, maybe twice, but feel far more confident that it's going to be done. That was our inform. So now we ask. And it might be, what types of things do you need to consistently ask them to do? So see how we're now starting to get into the detail with that person. And the other thing that I find when I use VIA is the reply I get to a VIA has got so much insight, or it's so thought out, that they often slide into my DMs straight away. Or if I then say, oh, I've got some stuff that might help, can I DM it to you? They're not just saying yes, they're saying, oh my gosh, yes, please help. Right? It's like, oh, you can fix this? Yes. Tell me what to do. Yeah. So that was parenting, and that was when you asked a question. Now let's do money mindset, and you've given a piece of advice. So you've given a piece of advice, money mindset, blah, 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 something to do with not looking after your money. And someone comments and says, well, that's all well and good, but I don't make enough money to look after it. Yeah. So how would we apply, validate, inform, and ask? It's like, yeah, I totally understand that. You can only stretch each dollar so far. Absolutely. So we've validated, yep. Income, a lack of income is often a driver of challenges around feeling abundant and money mindset, for sure. So we've just validated what they've said. Validate. Now we inform, right? And so the inform that comes to mind for me is that this is the critical thing to unlock, right? If you can feel abundant, if you are into the law of attraction, if you are understanding the power of money mindset in its influence on our actions and its influence on our results, then you, like, for me, the logical inform that comes after that validate would be the sooner I find with my clients, or I find that the sooner you can find those tiny moments of feeling amazing at your current income level, the faster you accelerate income growth, right? Or it might be the unfortunate reality is that the more consistently you have the programming in your brain saying, I don't have enough money, I don't have enough money, there's not enough money, the more your brain is fired up to collect evidence to support that belief. So that's why we need to flip the script, right? So that's the inform. I've given them, this is why we need to do it though, right? That very thing that you've said, that I've said, yes, that's absolutely true, is the very reason why we need to do something about it. So then ask, right? And in that case, it might be that I simply ask, what are some things that you do or experience now that do help you to feel abundant? Right? So I'm getting them to tap into that positive energy. That is powerful for that person. But again, if they reply, nothing, I've got nothing, beautiful conversation, right? It's a conversation starter. If they reply with a few examples, conversation started. Brilliant, right? We've hit all of those, we've ticked all of those boxes. All right, let's do one more, but hopefully so far, just based on these examples, you can see how powerful this validate, inform, ask can really be. So let's say you're a messaging expert and you've given people a little 3-step, right, on how to do a good messaging, just like I did with the VIA, right? And someone replies and says, does this work for messaging in parenting, or is it only for business to business? So one of the things that I see people do far too often when they get this kind of clarification is they jump straight into sales mode. Yes, this definitely works for parenting. You could do it like this. You could do it like this. We could definitely do this in a session. Do you want me to send you the details on how we can get you booked in, right? They're like, boom, boom, boom. They go straight into sales mode. Or they don't even ask, do you want me to send you the details? They're like, I'll DM you with a link to book in because we could do this in one session. You should book this session. It's $155. And they're jumping straight in and they haven't qualified if this person is actually a lead yet. So someone says, does this apply to parenting or is it just business to business? Validate, inform, ask. So validate would be, that's a really good question. Right? That's a really that's a really good clarification. And yes, it does apply to the parenting space. But here's where the inform is so powerful. Remember, the job of the inform is to show your expertise. So what I would be doing is giving an example of that framework for parenting right then and there in the comments. So for example, in parenting, if you're going to use this 3-step process, the way I would do it is A, B, and then C. Or I would do the 3 steps like, You're not just showing your expertise to the person who asked you that question. Every single person who sees that comment is going to see you in action. That is powerful for us to be able to see you in action. And then the ask, I would say, is there a particular area that you struggle to message to, or is there a particular part of your message you think you're struggling to get across to your audience, right? So I'm not asking them, do you want to book a session? I'm asking them a meaningful question that is going to further the conversation and tell me whether they're a good lead or not. I get 2 for 1 out of that type of response to their reply or their comment. So that is the validate, inform, ask framework. I have found even just in spelling it out for people at virtual conference, it's improved my answering people's emails and it's reminded me of what a good response looks like and what a good comment looks like. So I hope you found that really helpful. As I said earlier, in the show notes of today's episode, I'll put a link for you to come and ask me a question if you're struggling to apply this to your business, but I'll also put a link over to Skyrocket Sales with the coupon code for the best available price at the moment, because I do think that developing those sales skills and understanding how this fits in the broader sales process really makes a huge difference to the extent to which you balance where you're focusing your time and energy in marketing and sales in your business, because I think a lot of people are far too focused on reach and far too focused on conversion, and they don't have a reach problem and they don't actually have a conversion problem. They have a lead generation problem. And so we need to address that with the nurture and invite part of their client attraction process. But also in Skyrocket Sales, there's a bonus around lead generation to go even deeper, but also it breaks down that sales skill development process, and it breaks down the sales process in a little bit more detail, give you a little bit more structure so that you can ensure that the missing link in your business isn't simply that you just don't know how to sell. Because I think a lot of people don't actually know how to sell, and particularly don't know how to do it online, and they don't know how to do it in a way that is non-spammy, non-pushy. It's consent driven. So if that's something that you do struggle with, I highly recommend you come and grab the Skyrocket Sales program. And I'll make sure all those links are over with the show notes today at tashcorbin.com/534. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Heart Centered Business Podcast. And until next time, I cannot wait to see you shine. Bye for now.